Honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be sharing my time with the member from Louis Saint Laurent. Come to think of it, Louis Saint Laurent was the first Governor General that I had ever heard of when I was a young boy, but that's sidetracking. Listening to the member from Mississauga, Streetsville, and his view of the functions of committee, if Canadians are watching closely and they're not very careful, they're going to walk away believing in Cinderella and the fairy godmother. I mean, we had omnibus bills before the Finance Committee where we had 3,000 amendments and voted for 55 hours, and they didn't accept one single amendment. So to sit here today and try to tell us how wonderful it is in committee, I am proud of the member for Hamilton Centre. He's joining riding to mine for standing up for democracy as we understand it to be, and to stop these people from trying to force through a bill that is tainted, that is wrong. Now, Mr. Speaker, I always try to look for what is good in people, and so far it has served me well in life. And across the way, I sincerely believe that many of the members of this Conservative government who sought this office to be members of Parliament did it to serve Canadians. They're very neighbours. And I also believe that many came to this place to try and make Parliament a better place. But now I have to ask these same good members a question. These pro-democracy Conservatives, how did it come to this point? There is much more wrong with this bill than the vouchering part. If you listen to the speech after speech from the government side, you would think that the only problem that we saw with this bill was around the vouchering, and that's so far from the facts, Mr. Speaker. There is much more wrong. But I have to ask, how did these governing Conservatives reach the stage, these pro-democracy Conservatives, where they feel so empowered that they can justify to themselves that somehow it is their right and it's right and proper for them to deny tens of thousands of Canadians their participation in our democracy? Mr. Speaker, the arrogance of a few over there is quite astounding. One has been recently quoted as saying holding hearings for Canadians is virtually as important as is so important it would set about a circus. I guess that same member must perceive that Canadians who want to come before the circus would be clowns. Now, according to the member from Hamilton Centre who sits on PROC, and I should say, for those watching, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, that the Conservatives actually, in the beginning, were showing interest in perhaps having hearings across the country. And all of a sudden, that changed. And I think, as the member from Hamilton Centre said earlier today, the iron wall came down, bang. And we now have to bring to this place, the highest level of our Parliament, this question, and to get an answer from Parliament, not from the Prime Minister's office. This Opposition Day motion is seeking the opportunity for the Parliament to give direction that we believe would cause this committee to do its job properly. To hear witnesses who cannot not necessarily come here, witnesses region by region, people who are going to come before the committee from Elections Canada. Hopefully there will be agreement on the witnesses here and the political parties, but representatives of First Nations and anti-poverty groups, and groups representing persons with disability, and groups representing youth advocates, students and others who have raised their concerns and done so quite publicly. But, Mr. Speaker, amongst the things that are wrong, beyond the tens of thousands of students, seniors, Aboriginal peoples, low-income Canadians, and they are the ones that are most at risk, and yes, the homeless. You know, that's where a significant problem lies in this bill. So for us to have to come to this House and ask the Parliament to allow the proper outreach on a bill that's affecting the very democracy. You have trade committees traveling on a variety of trade issues, including the EU agreement. That's an important travel. I'm not criticizing that travel, but to say again that when you're making a change to law that affects people's opportunity to use their franchise to vote, you know, it can't be any more important or shouldn't be any more important. And an odd part of this bill for me, I was a school board trustee before coming to this place, and the wonderful part of that job is when you're talking to grade 4 students, grade 5 students, and they're asking questions about the democracy. And as an MP, I returned to many of those schools to talk to them. To ban Elections Canada from teaching kids about our democracy, how to encourage people to vote, and how to warn them about election fraud, because the actual person in the street, the voter, has an obligation to look to see where the problems might be, and if they find them, report them. Our Prime Minister, to my mind, is bringing U.S.-style voter suppression tactics and big money into the elections in Canada. And this Conservative group have been shutting down debate and ramming through a bill designed to stop some people from voting. Wouldn't happen to be those people that just might vote for someone else. But getting to the other parts of this bill is stripping Elections Canada of its investigative power. Wouldn't you think that traveling the country you just might come across people with good, solid input that might not be able to access this place? People such as, what comes to mind almost immediately, is professors in some of the universities. But removing the CEO's power at Elections Canada to engage in public education, I keep coming back to it because it's so basic and fundamental, it seems strange. The CEO now must seek Treasury Board approval to hire technical experts. Don't you put a person into place to manage this file? Do they not have the capacity to seek out technical experts? It's just strange, Mr. Speaker. Again, voter ID cards, which has been really, I would suggest I use the word manipulated by the government side to keep the focus on vouchering and ID cards when there's other things that are so clearly problematic. You know, the changes in the amounts of money that people contribute to their own campaign, up to $5,000. You know, in the leadership, they can put $25,000 into the leadership. That's increasing the ability for people with money to have an upper hand over people who are less affluent. And the idea of democracy is to have anybody can come here. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see you giving me the sign that I'm down to a couple of minutes. I appreciate that. You know, there's aspects to this bill that are missing, not just something wrong. And I've said many times in this place, the true purpose of committees is to work together. When a government brings a piece of legislation in, as far as I see it, it's the responsibility of the opposition to try to make the bill better. We've come to the stage in our committee where we're butting heads all too often, and that opportunity is not there. So really, Mr. Speaker, I want to go back to the most fundamental thing in closing, is the good people that are in this place with the proper intentions should give some serious pause. You're about to take part in a process that's going to limit people's franchise in this country. It's going to put an artificial limitation on people's ability to vote in a federal election, to choose their government. And it's very clear to those of us on this side of the House, if you start looking at the people that are going to be disenfranchised, they're already disenfranchised in society to many degrees. Many are poor, First Nations people. This is an added suppression, for lack of a better term. We can do better than this, Mr. Speaker. Take a look at this motion. Give true consideration to going out and hearing from Canadians, and put your trust in the democracy that Canadians deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.